I don't care for any of this.
We'll talk about that later. In a world where there have been 16 episodes recorded on a certain podcast, 3 men would dare to make a 17th. This is From the Middle. Thanks, Jim. Hey, as you guys just heard, this is our 17th podcast. My name is Kendall.
Who's Jim?
Who's Jim? Jim's our announcer.
Oh, okay.
Is there something confusing?
Nope. Keep
Good.
going. You're Kendall.
Yeah, my name is Kendall.
I'm Corey.
And Dylan.
And we are those 3 guys who were bold enough to make a 17th episode. And here we are.
How many did they make?
With us today, 17. 17. Guys, I'm excited. One of my best friends from high school. We've been going strong as friends since then because friends are friends forever if the Lord's the Lord of them. and you know what Jim has never said? Never.
Jim the announcer?
No, this is now a different Jim.
Different Jim.
Yeah, Jim the announcer left. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim. See you, buddy.
Jim's a very common name. But no, so we've got... Hold on. And wait for this. You're never going to guess who we have as a guest sitting across from us right now. The one and the only, ladies and gentlemen, James Taylor.
Yay!
I have never heard that joke before.
So, do you and Allison Krauss still talk?
Not as much as we used to. The years go by. The Lord was not the Lord of us, so.
So Jim's here. We're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons today.
Sup, virgins?
And that's why we got him. That's why we got him here.
Sup, virgin?
I didn't know if that joke was going to land very well.
Oh, that was awesome. I think it's the title.
We're going to get 17. A wildly different audience off of that title.
Seriously, guys, I'm super stoked to be here.
Oh, man.
Thanks for having me.
But your name really is James Taylor.
Seriously is James Taylor
We're not
II.
being funny.
Named after my father. He was adopted by his stepfather, actually.
Okay.
And my mother's name is Elizabeth, so my parents are James and Elizabeth Taylor. And you have to talk into the microphone the same direction the whole time.
So how many free table upgrades do they get at restaurants when they make reservations?
Them? Lots. Me, none.
Yeah. I'm impressed.
So James and I, and this is a story that I'm going to tell you guys, and I'll let Jim probably finish the story, but I'm going to start it off about how my wife met.
Well, first of all,
Jim.
in all seriousness, we've known each other for 21 years now. Do you know that?
Yeah.
That's a lot of years.
What grade is that?
I was in 10th grade. Kendall was in freshman year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So Amy and I are dating, right? And in those early stages of dating, I don't want to sound too cliche, but it was after maybe about like 6, 7, 8, 9 dates, somewhere around there.
Okay.
It became relatively evident, I think, to both of us that this was going somewhere.
Right.
And so during some of those deeper talks of talking about where you come from, and you start to learn about each other's past, and,
Right.
and you start to hear some names of some core people in your background, and for me, Jim comes up a lot because he's in the bulk of like my high school stories,
Sure.
and after, and currently still in my life. So like I'm still hanging out with him while I'm dating Amy.
Mm-hmm.
They knew it. They knew that I was seeing each other. So it was cool.
Yeah, we were cool with it.
But so just in my head one time when I'm telling one of these stories, it just pops into my brain that this this could be really funny if it works out the way that I want it to. So every time that I would mention Jim in one of my stories, instead of just saying Jim was there, I'd say Idiot Jim was there. And a couple times she's like, Idiot Jim? And I was like, yeah, no, that's what we call him. It's a term of endearment. We have these nicknames for each other. Like no one calls him Jim. Everyone just calls him Idiot Jim. And so she took that. And so then, like, for months and months, I'm dating Amy. We're talking about all these stories. Every time I'm referring to Jim as Idiot Jim, over and over and over again. Then comes the day when we hang out with some friends at Jim's house. I'll let Jim finish off the story.
So we had heard about Amy for months. We love Amy. First and foremost, love Amy, love Kendall. We've known each other for a long time. So we're there. It's our small group for our church. Another set of friends of ours, Greg, who has known us for me, Kendall longer, me just as long as I've known Kendall.
Sure.
We're there. Our wives, our kids, our family, friends. We're all meeting Amy for the first time, or most of us are. I walk up. I am so happy to meet Amy and to shake her hand and get to know her a little bit. And I stick my hand out and I say, "Hey, I'm Jim." And she goes, "Oh, Idiot Jim." And none of this. I had no idea that this was happening. And little did Kendall know, I had this crippling fear that I like people a lot more than they like me. And here comes this wonderfully sweet, charming lady. And her first impression of me is, Idiot Jim! And I just went, and Kendall is standing 5 or 6 feet away, like a kid at Christmas, waiting with bated breath for this to happen.
It's gonna
because that's what Kendall does, and it happens. And he's crying. He's laughing so hard, he's crying. And Amy, in the meantime, is mortified. I am just like, everything I know is now wrong and a lie because Kendall hates me apparently, and he's just laughing and he loves it. And yes,
that's great.
Each one of my kids, so that's 1, 2, 3. As a group, comes second to my wife. But next on that list of things that I am most proud of was that moment where I tried a long form joke.
And it played.
And it worked to a T.
I worked that for months.
How Pavlovian of you.
It actually worked.
And frankly, Amy and I spent the rest of the evening not conversing and couldn't look at each other. I had to have a heart-to-heart with Kendall where I was like, man, do you hate me? And he's like, no, this is even better. And it's just making it all the better for him that I am so suddenly like mentally a head case about it. So yes,
that's a very good story.
We talked. I came clean.
Oh yeah, he did. The best part of the joke is the reveal, right?
I didn't let it linger that long. Yeah.
No, it was
That's
great.
Very
and
funny. I'm sure even right now you're trending on social media. But if you don't reach the highest heights of stardom, you know that Idiot Jim and the Virgins is a great band name.
Idiot Jim and the Virgins. Done.
It's a great band.
That's
name.
happening. That's trademarked. You did that in one of the earlier episodes, episode 14. I think you just trademarked something. It's like declaring bankruptcy. I don't think you can actually just walk out and say, but if it is, for the record,
I declare bankruptcy.
Idiot Jim and the Virgins is my band name. You can't take it.
Got it. So tell us a little bit about yourself. And you already referenced an episode. Are you a middler?
I'm a middler, and first of all, this poll that you've taken about middies versus middlers, middies reminds me too much of midi-chlorians, so that cannot happen.
And I feel like middies is too cute.
Middies is a little
Too
cute.
cute.
It's a little weird.
What about middlemen?
Middlemen? I like that. I like middlemen, but I think middlers just rolls off the tongue.
I think that needs to be a fan, and I think, Jim, it's what you feel. Like, I don't think we can decide it.
Well, Jim says.
So I think Jim says, what if Jim gives us insight into the fans, but let us know, reach out on social media and tell us if you agree with Jim.
I think he just became leader of the fan club is what I'm hearing. And he just decided. So anyway.
Me and the Virgins, we vote middlers.
No, the rest of our fans can't be called. No.
Hey, listen, you lumped us all together as the king.
That's the band. Okay.
As the king of the middlers.
Anyway, thanks for your support, man.
That got egotistical really quickly. Hey, not a problem. I love listening to you guys. I think it's really cool what you're doing here. I've had the pleasure of knowing both Corey and Kendall, obviously for 21 years. Corey for several years now. Dylan, we just met, but I feel like we're going to be one big happy dysfunctional family by the time it's all over, and go from there. I love what you guys do, and I reviewed your podcast as perfectly mundane in all the right ways.
I like that.
It's the Seinfeld of podcast because you don't talk about anything, but everything is relevant. And good job.
Thank you.
Checks in the mail,
thank
man.
you. Yeah,
that's what we got. Checks in the mail.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
So me and my mom, we listen. I just want to point out one thing.
Elizabeth Taylor listens to her.
Longtime friend of the show.
Longtime friend of the show.
And
Speaking
Ludacris,
of long time,
if you didn't know,
you are literally leading right into the story I want to tell. Every time you say Ludacris, when I'm listening in my car, I go, "Whoa, that's Ludacris." Every time. And you didn't do it in the last couple, but my kids are like, "Dad, stop. Just, you got to stop."
That's awesome.
So
you make your kids listen to us?
Oh, yeah. Well, they think it's cool because they get to hear Mr. Corey and Mr. Kendall talk in the
sweet.
car. And you guys are, 99.9%, clean. It's not where, some of these podcasts I do listen to, that can get a little heavy. But
that's awesome.
To answer your question a little bit about me, I am a 36-year-old Taurus who enjoys long walks on the beach and deprecation. There's another.
Nice.
You like it?
I see what he did there.
No, I'm a father of two. I am, I'm a churchgoer with Kendall and Corey, and I love all things nerdy, whether it's podcasts, and Dylan, I think you pointed it out a couple weeks ago. You can be nerdy about anything. I'm nerdy about fantasy football and sports and camping, fishing, all those things, and Dungeons and Dragons.
Fantastic.
'Cause it's sweet.
It is. It is sweet. Now, as a listener of the podcast,
it
is my understanding that you have some notes, or you have some things that you were like,
thoughts.
I'm dying to.
So I will admit I had copious amounts of notes when I realized that you were going to have me on, and I took exception and some umbrage even to Dylan.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, he just has that kind of
totally fine with it.
You were talking about all basically the cutting the cord versus all the new streaming services that are coming out, and you were like, I'm going to paraphrase poorly, but it was verbatim something like, settle down, nerds. It's all going to be okay. And I was like, how dare you, sir?
Yeah.
How dare you?
It's very likely that I offend people.
Obvious exaggeration aside, I found myself, it was the first time I was listening, and maybe it's just because I don't know you personally, but I'm sitting there listening and I'm like, man, don't tell me how to feel. I am upset about this. I don't want to pay $90 a month. Oh, well, just sign up a different email every month. Get out of here with that. And I'm like talking in the car as I'm driving, and then you brought it all home at the end. And I'm literally like I've got a notepad next to me that I was writing things down like, how dare he?
Oh, man, that's so good.
And then at the end, you kind of were like, but you know what? I think a lot of people just don't know that there's all these other options. And I was like crossing off everything I said, because now all of a sudden, good guy Dylan shows up and he's like, guys, maybe people just don't know. And I was like, screw you, Dylan. You just took all of my talking points away.
It's you're right. You gave me a tip, or you provided a tip that I actually didn't. I don't think I ever said sign up with different emails, but some people do that.
Yeah.
I think the big thing was like, it's okay to go in and cancel.
Right.
And then go right back out and try something else.
And
I think
absolutely.
But yeah, that's a great point. Some people do that, and it's a great way to beat the system. So, thank you, Jim, for the unethical pro tip there.
You know what? That's what I'm here for.
Awesome. Yeah. That's a good note.
Yeah. That was a good note. I also wanted to point out that Malcolm Gladwell wrote 10,000 Hours. You talked about that in episode 1, and it's been driving me nuts for months.
Oh, Malcolm Gladwell wrote
If only we had a computer in our pocket.
What makes us professional? or experts.
Yeah, it's about the threshold for expertise and stuff
Okay.
like that. It's a really good book that I've heard. It's good.
So Jim, are you going to sing the fact check intro?
No, that's Corey's thing, even though I know it. So, are you fact checking me now?
No, I'm not.
Okay, good. Because I didn't write that one down. That one was from memory.
He's playing Golf Clash.
He's
It's
playing.
fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm over here eating Tic Tacs and
So no, that's
Golf Clash.
like I said,
That's fun.
lover of life and all things.
So you said you're a nerd about things or a geek about things. What are some of your biggest fandoms so that listeners can kind of get an idea of the realms that you?
So I love Star Wars. I love especially the now defunct expanded universe.
Yeah.
I was a huge fanboy. I've got dozens of books that I have either asked for as gifts, received as gifts, and read every single one several times. Just bought 2 new Timothy Zahn books. He wrote based on Thrawn, Grand Admiral Thrawn. He's one of my favorite characters. Love that. Can't wait to read them. I'm also a passionate Cleveland sports fan. You know, the Factory of Sadness. Although, hey, Cleveland Browns 2019, can't wait. Get on the bus. There's
This
plenty
is
of room.
probably the year. Yeah, I think Super Bowl is more than likely going to happen for Cleveland this year.
Stop it.
It's nice
I
to
know
hear
you're
that.
making fun of me.
It's nice to hear that said when it's
probably.
not drowning in tears.
It's probably
That phrase.
Listen. Yeah.
This is probably it.
This is the one shot.
I cannot think of a quarterback who's said to be more successful than Baker Mayfield.
What a world we live in where the Detroit Lions fan can make fun of someone else. The only other 0-16 fan representative, in the room gets to make fun of me for all things. But it's not. No, I know what you're doing, Kendall, and I don't like it.
I'm not. Hey, I'm just saying. I'm just get your hopes up, man. That's all I'm saying.
Can I ask for a follow-up question on Star
Absolutely.
Wars? You can only answer with the words thumbs up or thumbs down.
Go.
The prequel films.
Thumbs down.
Get out.
Prequel films, thumbs down. Really? Get out?
Just kidding.
No, okay. Thank you. Ooh.
No, I
was
do like
I
them,
really
but we can
misread
talk
the room.
about that. That's just such a big subject. No, but I always find that interesting because when you have those Star Wars fans, that's such a hot topic. Like, instantly one of the first things you can connect or not connect over is, do you like the prequel films? And so my quick answer for that, without getting too deep, but since you brought it up,
Go for it.
is
Yeah.
Star Wars to me is like, I've described Pixar this way for a long time. The worst Pixar film is still good. And that's how I feel about like Marvel and Star Wars right now. Even the prequels. The worst Star Wars film for a fan compared to the originals might be terrible. But I still think the worst Star Wars film is good. And that's my quick answer to the prequels.
I don't know if I'll go that far, but I definitely see where you're coming from because I also look at like, one of the overall themes that I wrote down when I was taking notes for coming in here was talking about shared collective experience. And I think kind of like when you talked about pizza, when you talk about Star Wars, when you talk about these things that people genuinely care about and give that visceral reaction to, it's because they found a shared collective experience in those things. Dylan, I really, it hit home to me when you talked about Captain America finally wielding Mjolnir in Endgame. Spoiler alert, sorry. And I will fully admit, I teared up and did one of those like gasping. And first of all, I do that in a lot of movies. I'm one of those people who cry in movies, whether it's The Lord of the Rings or it's something, if it's Kate and Leopold, whatever it is. That
was very specific.
That's very specific because I remember going in that movie. And, because I want to immerse myself in that. And I think the more immersed you are and the more invested in you are in those things. I mean, this was 10 years of our life. I don't feel like I'm stepping out of bounds when I say that. Am I? That's how you feel as well.
Yeah,
this is 10
I
years
absolutely,
of my life.
I absolutely do. And I think even with the Star Wars prequels, there's so many redeemable qualities. People will quickly jump on the downsides of those films.
And they're big.
And I had a good friend of mine once that he said, they're terrible. And I won't go into the whole explanation, but basically in about 2 minutes, I wasn't really trying to change his mind the first time I talked through it all, but by the end of it, he's like, oh, they're actually probably pretty good overall then. Like, the more we talk about it. Because it was just sort of like so you didn't like, so you didn't like this thing or this thing or this thing. And, well, no, I like that. Well, I guess I like that too. Well, and so, yeah, Marvel fortunately doesn't suffer from that at this point. It's just such a quality thing. But yeah, I don't think it's unfair to say that it's that impactful when we've been watching for that long. And Star Wars is the same. But with that great, with all that time and weight attached to it emotionally, it's easy for people to feel disappointed too, because we have a lot invested. And so, I don't think that type of reaction is over the top. No one would bat an eye if you went into a purely romantic movie and teared up. So why is it, if there's
Thank you for saying that.
If there's just as much weight, if there's just as much weight attached to this character arc, who cares whether it's in an action movie or it's in a romantic movie, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I totally agree.
So this is where I'll plug an article that we just posted on our Facebook page. Hollywood Reporter was interviewing Jon Favreau, and they were talking about Mandalorian. They were talking about his other Disney projects, Lion King, and the prequels, and Lucas came up. And I'm paraphrasing. I'm not going to fact check this later, but he basically says, like, say what you want about the prequels. Lucas, with those films, added a significant amount of weight to the foundation of that universe. Yes, there was too much green screen. Yes, Jar Jar Binks is the worst thing to happen to Star Wars. Yes, all these things. However, you can't ignore the storytelling weight that was added with those films. So,
and nothing else original or since has done world building in the way that he did in those films.
Yeah,
That's
so,
absolutely
not
unparalleled.
Episode 7 and 8.
Yeah,
and as much as I love Episode 7, it was a J.J. Abrams. Shoot, now we're talking fanboys from 5 years ago. But, I mean, it was kind of a rehashing. It was a reintroduction, but it set up Rian Johnson to do what he wanted to do, whether you like it or not, and which I don't. And it does. It expands that, and it opens it back up to make it much more massive.
Yeah.
And the prequels did that, for better or for worse. Again, some things were great, some things were way too long, like pod racing, but and we can sit and bang on it all day long, but at the end of the day, George Lucas gave me, if I can make it individual for a moment, gave me one of the greatest influences and massive amounts of pleasure from my life that nobody else can touch.
Yeah.
And you know what? At the end of the day, I've kind of come down and said, yeah, it sucked watching after 30 years Luke Skywalker holding a lightsaber again for the first time and him chucking it over his shoulder. It still gets me. Like, how disrespectful, but again, that's because it's made personal, and I wouldn't experience that range of emotions without the good and the bad. So
yeah, I think if I even walking away from the movie, right after, it just felt like that was certainly high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
He took chances. Maybe most people didn't like it, but you certainly can't fault him for it being a tame repeat of another movie.
Yeah.
He took big chances in it. You either liked it or you didn't.
And the
either way, you spent money on it.
Either way,
yeah.
Disney cashed the check. So
the big question that I pluck out of what you guys are saying is, when does the creator lose the rights, and that's in air quotes, to the thing he created? And when does it become public domain? And when do the fans dictate what happens next? So his original intent, as the guy who dreamed all this up, I think he's still owed some artistic license. So whatever he chooses to do with that, you don't get to just decide by mob what good is and isn't. This is the thing he started. So in defense of Lucas, to that point, and I agree, I think there's things that he did that were like, I don't understand. Why would you?
Right.
That's not, that's a great question to ask with any created thing. You could say the same for Rowling and Harry Potter. You could say the same thing for, So it's just really, it's a good question to ask. Like, what's the line there? When do they lose the rights to their thing? So we could go off on all kinds of fandom conversations of things we share.
Yeah, absolutely.
But one thing we don't necessarily share, which you could shed some light on,
Sure.
is this D&D thing.
Yeah. So the scourge of 80s Christianity,
Yes.
as I wrote down.
That's exactly. So that's where I have questions prepared.
Well, so
excellent.
do you have questions? Okay.
I have questions.
Like how-
I mean, they're not necessarily great questions.
While
but
you're
I've
looking
got
those up, I did want to point out just a couple of things. My history with D&D. First and foremost, I rolled my eyes every time up until about 6 years ago when I finally sat down and played. A guy at work came
So
up
this
to
is
me.
a recent. This is a recent.
Yeah, in my
for
life
you.
it is.
Okay.
I'm actually getting ready in 2 days to run my first campaign. So I've been writing, I've been world building and doing all these things. That's what I was doing in your green room over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you like all the fancy drinks and snacks?
I did. You know, the water fountain with the 2 buttons taped over so you
Yeah.
could only get the cold water
Yeah.
was a good touch. I
Yep.
liked that.
I couldn't believe we fit a TV on the wall that big. I
Yeah.
mean,
That's-
whole
yeah.
wall.
Chocolate fondue fountain.
Amazing.
Yes, I didn't partake. I just
really?
looked. Yeah, I can't. That's
So
Yeah.
much
Okay.
self-control.
Did Jar Jar
So,
Binks serve you up a good drink?
I threw him out immediately, sir.
Good call.
There you go. That's why he's there. So people
I know.
Right.
So we can get that
Throw 'em out.
hostility out at the beginning. So I just started, 6 years ago, and I will say this: the group I play with is one of Kendall and I's mutual friends. I mentioned him earlier. His name's Greg. Another friend of ours, mutual, named John, Marcus as well. Six nerdy guys sitting around a table,
Yeah.
with a 20-sided die and a story to tell, and depending on who is the person in charge of that, you can hear them called, in traditional D&D settings, it's the dungeon master. You can hear them called a game master. Really anything. They're the people in charge. They're the ones who either are telling the story that has already been written by Gary Gygax and his crew for the last, 40 years.
So there's preset campaigns.
There are preset campaigns,
Or you can write
purchase,
your own.
or you can write your own.
Okay.
So I am currently writing my own campaign called The Greenbrier Shadow.
Okay.
And as I say it out loud,
You
it sounds
smiled first,
super-
I
I did. I know. I know. But at the end of the day, I'm so proud of the way it's turning out. Like, it's going better than I ever thought. It's getting my creative juices flowing again in writing capacity, which I have not done for years. And we play about once a month to every 6 weeks. So really, in the scope of 6 years, I've really only played 50 times, quote unquote. And that
50?
doesn't
50?
50.
Okay.
And that doesn't sound like a lot until you sit with people who have done this for 20 some years. And you get into people who know the rules by heart, and you look at the detailed work that goes into just creating the game itself. I'm boring you? Is that what's happening, Kendall?
No,
Kendall's
no.
yawning.
Kendall
plays used to play with us too.
I've
so.
got dietary reasons right now as to
Gotcha.
why I'm yawning and
Getting swole,
weird.
burning them cows.
Right.
So yeah, it's
So
it's
go
really
back. I don't
fun.
want. So
No,
go back.
ahead.
So you said 6 years ago, you just kind of rolled your eyes when you would hear about this.
I did.
And I don't want to step on Kendall's questions. So stop me if I am.
No, I don't.
No, so Greg finally looked at me and he goes, "Jim, you play role-playing video games. You play
Right.
RPGs. You play Skyrim. You play Knights of the Old Republic. You play all of these Fallout. All of these things. That's literally what we're doing, except at a table. Come hang out." So he bought me my first set of dice. He bought me, a little minifigure that I got to play as my character once he found out what it was going to be, and I fell in love with it. And it is so much fun. It's exactly as nerdy and as dorky as you think it is, and it is 10 times more enjoyable than I ever thought it could be.
So this is one of my favorite positions to be in right now. And I talked about it in the IndyCar episode. When you get to sort of deep dive into this subculture that you know nothing about. So I am just like excited to like just be on the verge of like learning more about this, because I know are all the stereotypical jokes.
Sure.
And the very little bit that Stranger Things taught me.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that kind of has that increased its popularity, like the
Oh, yeah.
references to it that
Yeah.
are in the zeitgeist now.
Yeah, you start to Google the word demigorgon, and 3-4 years ago that's not popping up, or if it does, it's a Wikipedia page that takes you to Gary Gygax, who's the creator of Dungeons, Dragons, and
Sure.
Wizards of the Coast, and all those things. And now you've got it's becoming more mainstream. You know, the guy who told me about Stranger Things, he looked at me and he goes, because, you know, I'd been playing for a couple of years. He goes, hey, you're going to love this show. He has no interest whatsoever in Dungeons and Dragons, anything nerdy. He doesn't like sci-fi, anything. He goes, I binged this show in one day.
Yeah.
The whole first season. And I went, whoa, coming from this guy that I worked with who has no interest whatsoever in any of it. And then I watched the first episode and went, how in the world did you make it through? And then you just realize it's just good storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's really what a good D&D
And you know we're
campaign
big on
is.
that, so that's
Exactly.
like right up our alley. And we know, I mean, don't you have acquaintances that have entire D&D podcasts? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I'll have to shout him out later because I'm just blanking on the name right now. We'll try to tag him. But a guy I used to work with, they're actually starting one where they're going to play live on the podcast.
Awesome.
He said something about wanting guests, and I said I'd be happy to hop on, honestly, as the sort of ignorant voice. Like, I know nothing.
Yeah.
And so I'll hop on if you guys don't mind me asking questions and just to see what it's all about. I think they stream it actually on Twitch.
Oh, cool.
It's not on like a normal podcast app, but they're calling it a podcast. So,
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's kind of been in the background of being aware of it, but very little knowledge on the game.
Yeah. So that's I'll put my interviewer voice on
Sweet.
now. So when it when it comes to celebrating Satan and his demons,
Satan?
is that something that you willfully partake in, or is it more of a creep up on you kind of thing?
Well, let me ask you this. So, as far as the satanic aspects of Dungeons and Dragons, were you a child at any point in your life?
No.
No? Well, that's poor for you. However, most of us being children at some point in our lives, did you ever play pretend?
I see where you're going with this. We'll probably come back to that one later. What are the rules?
Oh, get out of here. That's a setup. There's a lot of rules.
I'm afraid we won't come back to that first one, and I think is an important one. So
I kind of like leaving it
let
hanging for a while.
me just say, we all grew up in Christian homes.
Mm-hmm.
We all
Yeah.
grew up in pretty conservative Christian homes.
Yes.
I would say, right?
Fact.
There were like a couple things we were told to stay away from.
This is where I think it would be inaccurate to say that it was Christianity on the whole was a part of that movement,
For sure.
because I was part of a relatively fundamental Christian home that did not go down the line that you're about to go down. So anyway, I'll
Right.
put that-
It's not
I'll put that out there.
exclusive to
Sure.
the church.
Right.
But there were a couple things we were told to stay away from.
Yeah.
Ouija boards, Dungeons and Dragons, and I had to burn my own Ninja Turtle action figures because one of them had a yin yang belt.
Oh, man.
So I had to go burn my own Ninja Turtle.
trying to think
Well,
of
you
which
don't wanna be
action figure
inviting
that was. Was
kind of
that
thing into your
Slash?
home.
Wait, that was two things happened at once just now.
Sorry.
What?
You don't want to be inviting that kind of thing into your home.
And there was a church we were part of for a very short period of time that decided, for whatever reason, that owls were demonic, and so everyone had to get rid of their owl decor.
But have you seen an owl? I mean,
So
wait, decor?
Yeah, anything that had an owl on it. If you had washcloths
Lot
that
of owl
or
sweaters.
dish towels that had. So I asked Dylan, the history guy. I said, "Can you just do a little like flyover
Yeah.
research on the satanic panic of the '80s?"
Oh, it stretched
I want
so
you to-
much farther.
I want
than
you to talk
just
about
those,
it too,
yeah.
but seriously, like, how did that start? Why is that even in the? And I know people to this day that if they hear D&D, they go demons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I was trying to read up on it because, again, this is not something I was familiar with. And as far as that whole idea of the 80s and the early 90s being the trouble spot, I'm a little too young for that to have been on my radar.
Brag about it.
Yeah. So I was reading up on it a little bit, and it really it's very multi-layered. So I'm going to boil this down super simply and just kind of highlight some bullet points that would get rattled off. So you have a lot of culturally people kind of coming out of the 60s and 70s. You have a lot of people kind of seeking, I want to say, I don't want to just say just truth, but looking for things to kind of latch onto, it felt like there was less of this gray area in the world, and people are trying to make things a little more black and white. Politically, you've got Reagan, who's incredibly popular, and this sort of resurgence of Christianity surrounding Reagan and the Republican Party, things like that. And then you also have more cases, incidents of types of child abuse that were people were kind of aware of, but were pretty hidden. And those things are starting to come to light actually in the news and the media. And so you've got all of these things kind of swirling around culturally that are happening that are probably not direct causes, but all of them collectively sort of added up to this whole idea of what is good and what is bad. And I think part of human nature is I think we don't like gray areas. We don't like things being ill-defined. We want things to be black or white, good and bad. That's why people don't like films that don't have a happy ending, or the ending is sort of left open-ended. We don't like that. It's not built into us to enjoy that. And so culturally, you had a lot of different things happening, and you had some incidents that had taken place. I think there was a preschool in California that things were tied back to, and you've got reports, sort of leading questions by these doctors with kids that are somehow tying these incidents to satanic rituals. And I don't know enough of the really specific, like, multiple occurrences sort of added up to all of this. And then you also had law enforcement that was sort of thrown into this as well. They're getting these tapes, these training videos on like how to handle all of these swirling allegations of satanic rituals in adults and children, and all of these things that are coming to light culturally. And so it was just a really big mix. It even spread to parts of Africa, South Africa, this whole idea, and still continues to this day. Now, virtually everyone will tell you in hindsight, everything was debunked. There was never really any ties to any kind of satanic rituals or anything like that. But you also had, along the way, you had all these rock bands that people were pointing to as examples of kids being turned, and there's just so much that tied into it culturally. So I'm not going to list everything, but that's a lot of what's happening all in that time that's contributing.
And looking for something to blame. So it's happening right now with video. It has been happening for years with violent video games. It's still happening.
Music, television. Yeah, when we can statistically prove that these things just aren't the case.
And isn't that where the parental advisory on album covers started? Like all that sort of like, we've got to point to something that's to blame for all this. So anyway, back to the guy who plays it. Was that something you heard growing up? Was that a stigma that you had around it? And then were you what did you discover through actually starting to talk to demons directly?
I'm sorry that you called my friends demons.
No, not your friends. That's how the demons get in.
That's how they get in.
Yeah,
so because you play.
The first time,
I'm afraid that you might not even be aware.
Is this what's happening? This is an intervention.
This is an intervention
/ exorcism.
We have an exorcist standing just outside.
Awesome. Okay, all right.
He was dressed as Jar Jar Binks earlier.
His name is also Jim.
So I thought I cast him out. However,
so just speak to that, like everything, all that context that we just laid for you, and
there's no landmines there. So ultimately, yes, I did grow up in a very traditional Christian home, especially in the 80s and the 90s. Growing up, you hear those things, Dungeons and Dragons. But you know what? I also heard the same revile for Garbage Pail Kid, stickers and stuff like that, which are disgusting, by the way. Now I look at them as a parent and I'm like,
yeah, ain't no way.
No, So, growing up, I heard those things. I sit down at the table for the first time and I'm like, all right, I know I'm kind of a nerd, but like these guys are nerds. They gotta be, because that's the stereotype. That's the thing you heard. And then, I'm sitting down with people with very good jobs, and some of them families, and they're well adjusted. They're not just these booger eating, pimply faced guys sitting in their basement. I mean, we were at a kitchen table, so they're totally different. No.
Right.
I immediately, as somebody who loves immersive content,
Yep.
and I love my RPG characters in video games tend to look like me. I try and make them realistic and
Right.
try and immerse myself. It's why I love great movies and great storytelling in video games.
Can I interject real quick? What's
Yeah.
an RPG for anybody
I'm
who
sorry.
doesn't play those type of games?
Role-playing game. So, I mean, exactly what it sounds like. You are playing the character. You use the pronouns I, me, when you're speaking about your character. It's what I found as somebody who has been on stage before is all I was doing was playing pretend with my friends.
Right.
At the very debased level,
Right.
all I'm doing is playing pretend. I might as well have been Cyclops from the X-Men at 11:30 every Saturday morning, because as soon as that theme song ended, that's what I was out in my yard doing, was, using my optic blast to, take down my 3 little brothers.
Right.
Suck it, nerds. So
Thank
thank you. And every time anybody says X-Men, in my head I go,
That's what you hear?
yes. And
There's
it's
a
the
whole
greatest
YouTube
theme song.
There's a whole YouTube video. We'll post the link to it that talks about like why scientifically that's the best song
Oh,
ever.
I love it.
It's really cool. Anyways,
Yeah, no,
continue.
you're not wrong. So that's the thing, is what I realized after about 20 minutes was, if anybody actually sat down and looked, and yes, if you go through the Dungeons and Dragons manuals and all the things, it is a well thought out, frankly, extremely well written world and universe of a bunch of people who sat down and said, we play pretend that we're wizards, and sometimes if you're playing the role of a bad guy, you're a sorcerer versus a wizard, and yes, you do bad things and and I'm like, this is literally nothing more than every theater nerd's like perfect game.
So why the huge misunderstanding, do you think? Like, what's the harm in that? Like, what's wrong with teenagers or adults sitting around a table playing pretend to a story with some dice? And like, why do you think?
To answer that question, I would say a lot of it has to do with, we talk about shared collective experience in a positive aspect. It doesn't matter how many times something's been debunked. It doesn't matter how many times you go through. Reinforcement happens, and studies are showing now that the more something is disproved to you, the less likely you are to change your stance, especially if those people forced that information on you. Because there's such an emotional response to that, because we grew up with that visceral response of, get back Satan, for Dungeons and Dragons, or whatever role-playing tabletop game you're playing, because there's thousands of them out there, and some of them are really good. And it evokes that initial response. I think you have to, for me anyway, I had to physically like walk in and push all that aside and go, what is this really? And a lot of people don't want to, I don't want to say don't want to do that, but that can pertain to a lot of different things.
You mean have an open mind and actually investigate
Right.
something yourself?
And
That's
yeah.
the thing. Like,
Whoa.
because some of the things that you hear are there's spells in there, and the only other
Sure.
place that you can find those spells are in the writings of Wicca, and that sort of thing. And it's like, and it's all of these, to your guys' point, like, all of these naysayers are people who have never experienced the game. Like,
Right.
they've not so much as watched somebody actually play it,
Right.
much less play it themselves and try it. And it's like, if you sit and play it, because I have played it, right? And so, like, that's not even if that's true, like, they just use that as source material. And it's not as if, like, when you're playing, you're not like, okay, I'm gonna try a spell and see if it works. and so then you rattle off the words, and you had to memorize so many spells in order to be successful at this game. Like, that's not how it works. You literally just say, yeah, I'm gonna try a healing spell,
And then you roll your dice,
and
to see
then
if
you
it's
roll your
successful.
dice and see if it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's literally how the game's played.
Can we kind of lump that into the idea of cognitive dissonance, that like
Yes.
Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of
Yep.
the Rings are okay with witches and dragons and elves
Right.
and orcs because the people that wrote those stories happen to be Christian. Whereas Dungeons and Dragons, featuring virtually all the same types of characters, happen to not be written by presumably a Christian.
Yeah,
I mean, can we just lump it all
Yes.
in? One is good and one is
exactly.
bad.
As far as we know.
It's story-driven, weird creatures with magic and various other elements.
yeah.
So you have little characters.
Yeah.
Getting pragmatic again. Like you have little characters and you put them on a board or like a field.
So it just depends. Like you can roll out like a dry erase mat with some grids on it. You know, there's rules to movement.
Like Warhammer and
Yeah, exactly.
and stuff like that.
I played
yeah.
I played Hero Clicks for a little bit.
Okay.
Really, really simplified.
Yeah, absolutely.
type of
I
game.
think I don't think Skylanders is like that, but
No, that's
something
the more on the console.
That's the console.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's exactly right. You know, there's certain rules, classes. You can build your character, level up, doing all those things to accomplish whatever goal it is in the campaign and in the game.
Yeah. So maybe let's back that up and let's just describe. So you're not in the middle of a campaign or anything yet. You're about to start one.
Yeah,
You don't have any characters yet. You're about to create them.
correct.
And you walk into the room. You sit down with your friends. How do you play the game? Just
So-
give me like sort of your experience. How do you guys do it?
As far as what we do, because there's actually several different editions of Dungeons and Dragons. They update it, they streamline rules, they take things out, put things in. We typically, played what was called version 3.5, which is a slight variation of version 3. We're now switching to version 5, 5th edition. So this is the first time that most of us are doing it. So typically, regardless though, when you sit down, if you're coming in completely cold, you roll up a character. You know, the dungeon master typically has, or the game master typically has a campaign outlined, because you also don't want to railroad your players and make all the decisions for them.
So the dungeon master is the person
Yeah.
in charge.
The narrator, he's all your NPCs, which are non-playable characters. He's the bartender that your characters are talking to, and then he turns around and he's the governess of the Southern Marshes. Yes, those are the things that I created. Not a bartender, but
Yeah.
everyone
So else-
he's everybody else.
So to the
Everybody
layman-
else is so you have sitting around the table, you have the dungeon master. Everybody else is a player.
Correct.
The dungeon master is the person who put this whole campaign, this
Mm-hmm.
whole world together. The players have no idea what it is.
Right. And so he's worked out the plot and he's worked out the conflict points.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
when there's a battle and the players are playing against the monsters and stuff, and they're rolling and battling and whatnot, the DM is playing the part of the monsters for all of those.
Right.
Yeah, and all that. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you're
No,
fine.
that's good.
So, that's exactly right. And as far as player creation, sometimes the DM will tell you, hey, you can only select a character from these 5 types, orcs, elves, gnomes, dwarves, and let's throw another one out there. Help me out.
Paladin.
Paladin. Well, paladin is a class of.
Shows you what I know.
Yeah. So, but
Troll.
Okay, fine, a troll. So, thank you. And then you pick from there. Okay, what kind of class of character are you going to do? Okay, do I want to be somebody who casts magical spells? Do I want to be somebody who casts magical spells but only heals people? Do I want to cast magical spells but I protect people?
Or a warrior. Or
a warrior, a sword and board. I carry a sword and a shield. And you can look at, take the Avengers, for example. Captain America would be a defender. He has, typically, his shield and some weapon he's using. That's more of a tank class. You start building and deciding, okay, what do I want my character to be? And then you get to this really cool part in character creation where you turn the storytelling over to the players and you say, now tell me who you are. And they get to go, okay, well, I'm a 36-year-old, Taurus who likes long walks on the beach, but the reason I do that is because I have this fear of the ocean because my parents were, drowned on a boat and I was orphaned. But I have to stay near the ocean because I feel close to them. And they can build these characters and these little mini worlds in and of themselves, and then you get to help tell their story.
Are there any visuals, as the artist in the room, are there any visuals accompanying any of this?
So,
Or is it just...
Because so far you have
a
you
grid.
have a sheet of paper.
yeah. So far we've got a grid and a Sharpie. This is a map that I'm working on. You can't see this at home. It's really great for illustration. But this is a map of the area that I'm using, and I took it from some other places and video games I've played, ideas that I've gotten from other types of RPGs, role-playing games, whether it's video games or campaigns we've done in the past. There's 5 different sections here.
Okay.
And they're all connected to main cities. You're starting here in the southern marshes. You move all the way through this area.
And that's something you show them as the dungeon master?
Correct. Yeah.
So you're just giving them the lay of the land.
So giving them the lay of the land. And also, I have 5 territories that are called holds that make up the unified holds. We'll call that the nation that we're in.
Okay.
And I created flags for each of them. A country's flag. They're very rudimentary. They're very basic, but like, hey, this one, this area is strictly their main source of income is whaling. So their flag is ice blue, and it's got a whale diving into the water.
So for those of you who can't see, think Game of Thrones, where
Exactly.
every region,
every house,
house has a flag that represents the main commerce in that area, or dragons or lions or.
And maybe you'll excuse like a crude analogy, but
Please.
It almost feels like you're the writer and the director, and you've built a set, and you've got some actors, and you said, "This is kind of the world we're in. Look at the set around you. I'm going to need you guys to improv your roles a little bit, and then I'll direct and guide you along the way."
Correct.
And so it almost feels like you've built this whole world, but your physical props might be on a sheet of paper. Their costumes might be on a little miniature figure,
Right,
and some props on a table,
Exactly.
versus an actual set around them that they're standing in.
Yeah.
So I'm almost imagining this writer, director, set builder is kind of your game master. as your-
absolutely.
Okay.
So,
But are there people that like dress up and like?
LARPing?
oh yeah,
Okay,
there are.
So there are levels within this.
So what
yeah.
point do you guys do that?
We have never done that. So I have never partaken in what's called live action role play, which is LARPing. The most famous video out there on YouTube is these people out in the woods, and it looks hilarious. And somebody's throwing like tennis balls or something, going lightning bolt, and then this big towering styrofoam guy falls over, and all of a sudden, like this little elven person from the bottom of the screen stands up and just starts clapping.
Yeah.
And I love it because it perfectly encapsulates what a lot of
Now those people are weird.
those are weirdos.
Yeah.
We
Not
might
these
be able
cool guys like me.
we might be able to imagine something like a Renaissance festival.
Yeah,
for
no,
those people.
and it really is.
Probably a decent way to describe
with foam weapons.
There's
with
there's an
foam.
entire one of my very best friends in the world. He partakes in what's called Penzik, which is a large. It's a live action role play. It's a Renaissance festival type where they go out and they camp and they have battles. They have houses that are from all over the country and some times all over the world that they come and they partake in these things.
And all you 57-year-olds out there who are thinking, what a bunch of geeks, you're the same ones doing Civil War reenactments, so zip it.
I would also do that. That's cool.
No, I'm just saying, like,
No, it is.
We're all
You're right.
geeks.
Yeah. It goes back to Dylan's point that everybody's a nerd about something. And we're in a culture and we're in a society now that is one of the more accepting, that they like to tout that they're the more accepting. And then on the converse, they're some of the quickest to point out, but we're not like those guys.
But even those guys, and then I keep saying this, you can all find each other now.
Exactly.
Like, you can all
Yep.
find each other now because of social media.
for better or worse.
For better or for worse.
And I think that's one of the, going back to the widespread panic in the 80s. And first of all, D&D was a very small part of the overall panic that happened with like, the satanic
for
fear
Yeah,
that swept across the country.
No Halloween.
Yeah, and that, I mean, going back to it, is that small part. It's all about getting back to the root and fundamental. You didn't have the internet back then.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have this vast information superhighway. You had what the news was telling you. And as somebody who's worked in and been in newsrooms where you get to see the big boards, the stories they're working on, I mean, what sells is the panicky stuff. Well, that's now. Imagine, 30 years ago when we didn't have instant debunking. We didn't have a Snopes.com. We didn't have all these places where we could go. We didn't have a little sign that says source needed that we can quote on Wikipedia.
Exactly. Yeah. When you're talking about a day and age where people had no choice but to rely on the source that was telling them how it is.
And the source was panicked in many cases.
Exactly. I mean, mainstream. If 60 Minutes is running an episode where they're telling you how there's X number of suicides that are being related to Dungeons and Dragons, you just have to believe it because you can't look that up on your own.
Right.
Yeah, that's in the same way that the news now will say, is video games the cause in true clickbait fashion?
Exactly.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we're going, literally other countries outsell the U.S. in video games and have 1/1000th of the homicide rate.
Yeah, it's almost like you didn't even get to the point where you were making the statistical problem of saying that correlation means causation. Like you didn't even get to that fallacy,
right?
And that's the fallacy everyone makes. So it's like blaming video games for violence doesn't even reach that threshold.
Yeah, maybe they're just bad parents.
Yeah.
Could just be that.
And I'm not winding us down at all, but when I'm hearing you talk, I'm hearing community, storytelling, hobby, entertainment.
Yeah.
Where's the problem?
Yeah.
No, and that's something that once I started playing, because there were still even within my family, within circles of friends that I had whether in church or out of church, looking at it going, I don't know, man, that's kind of weird. And looking at me and I just said, no, it's exactly what it's a bunch of nerds sitting around telling a cool story, and I'll never forget and sharing in something together that, hey, how often in my job every week, especially in previous jobs I've held, where all I'm doing is seemingly putting out fires, but I'm not actually doing anything. I'm answering emails, but I'm not creating. I'm not building anything.
Yeah.
And this writing this campaign, I feel like I'm actually creating something.
Yeah. When's the last time you drew in a notepad?
No. I was probably 12.
Right.
And I probably still have it. And it was probably of Cyclops from the X-Men because he's awesome.
So if nothing else, here's a 30-whatever-year-old guy who got out a pen and started drawing and imagining.
And I asked you just the other day, I was like, hey, do you have an iPad or something that I could borrow to do some of this, because I feel like I want to share it.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean.
So what a beautiful thing that you're creating and imagining and storytelling and the best, I don't know the best, but some of the best counselors, psychologists, one of the first things they do with adults is you need to rediscover the idea of imagining and play, and all the stresses of the world are enough. What's so wrong with taking a breather, taking a minute, just imagining or playing with your kids or dressing up like a superhero and running around in the backyard. Life is hard enough as it is. I think it's okay that people have some outlets.
Sure.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I've said to a few friends, it's probably been mentioned, but I think at least Corey and I are big Lego fans.
Yeah.
And I've brought it up a few times, and sometimes you get a little bit of you're in your 30s and like Lego. and typically my response is, if I even remotely get that look, I'll say, I'll tell you how I unwind. If I can just sit and build, it's one way. Movies are one of my other happy places. But if I can just sit and build and it's quiet and I turn on music in the background and I've got a food or snack or drink that I like, or all of them, and I'm enjoying all of that. But I'll tell people it's so relaxing.
Yeah.
And I'll say go to the closest store with a bunch of Lego, find something that's $20 or $30 in a theme that you enjoy looking at, and just sit and build it on your own.
Yeah.
And if you like music, turn on some music and throw it in the background.
Absolutely.
Go buy the Bond Lego set, the Bond car, or go buy the little merry-go-round or a
The new
car or a
Friends.
plane or the new Friends. Their Legos making a Friends set with Cafe Nervos. No, Cafe Nervos is Frasier.
That's Frasier.
Central Perk. A
you
Central
go.
Perk set with all the minifigures. Like,
Yeah.
go buy that, sit quietly, turn on some music if you like that, and just try it.
Kendall, what did I bring in tonight to record? What did I bring in?
What did you bring in?
I brought in my Lego minifigure Emmett.
Yeah, I forgot his name, and I didn't want to be rude.
And he's got his coffee and his headphones.
Yeah.
And I was like, it makes me happy. Like
Yeah.
it just makes me happy to look at him sitting there.
Yep.
Like, and I'm 34, and
Yeah.
I still ask for Lego sets for Christmas and my
It's
birthday.
fun.
Yeah.
We
So-
we have the same. My son is 8, and he's just what? It
was just-
no, it is. I mean,
know,
It was the
but it's-
funny transition from
Well-
34 to 8.
But one of those experiences he's having right now with Legos with the S on the end. I noticed you didn't do it. You won't do
Well,
it. You're
the-
a purist.
The official.
I know.
Plural.
I know.
It's
The plural of Lego is Lego. But anyway, so one of the great things that he's discovering right now is, and I really mean it's great, he doesn't think it's great, is when somebody breaks his Legos that he's been building and working on. And I go, no, you don't understand. You get to do it all over again. And he is just like, no, this is the worst. I put it together. And I'm like, I remember, man. I remember. But let me help you with it. And then we get to do it together.
Absolutely.
And it's awesome.
So back to the point of community, like
Yeah.
there's AFOL, adult fans of Lego, and there are groups of these people that meet up and build things and have fun. And like it's easy to make fun of the subculture that you're not in.
Yeah.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it.
Sometimes it's fun to make fun of the.
Yes.
Hey.
Also good.
Hey, listen,
I'm judging all three of you right now.
we can tell by that look on your face.
Smug Kendall. Smug Kendall.
That's me.
It's a very similar look to the one that I had when I was in a hotel once and there was a furry convention going on.
Oh, man.
That's a whole new level of
And if-
LARPing.
And
Yeah.
if you've never seen that, very carefully do a Google search.
Nah, don't.
Yeah, you know, it's
No.
for the best that you don't do this on
Well,
your
that's
work
probably because
computer.
it can get real weird real quick.
Turn on your search engine filter
And then
There it is.
and then search it.
and
Yeah.
then
But
search.
don't. But if you really want to, some people just have to see that train wreck, you know.
Oh,
And
man.
I mean, like, I've actually seen like a bridge explode. Like, some people just like seeking out things that you're probably not supposed to want to watch.
Right.
But like, you just gotta see.
So could I sit in on one of your campaign? Like, how long does a campaign last?
So because we only play once every 4, 6, sometimes 8 weeks or even longer, our campaigns typically run pretty long. Like our sessions run pretty long, meaning we get together typically on a Friday night. We start at 6:30 and we end sometimes around 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning.
And that's a one campaign,
That's-
or that's like part one.
It just depends. I've written what can be a standalone one shot, what you call a one shot, but it will take maybe 2 or 3 sessions because our group tends to go down the rabbit trail and get
Is there
lost
literally a rabbit
sometimes.
trail? Is there? A
There
race?
is not in this one.
Okay.
There's no
Like with a race of rabbit people.
like yeah. No, so not in my campaign, but
Okay.
in other worlds maybe.
Are there
So-
are there pre-written stuff that's like if
Yeah.
you have this amount of time, here's a good 3-hour one, or
As far as I mean, that really depends on the group that you're playing
players,
with
yeah.
and the players and how in depth they are and how engaged they are. Because, for example, one of the most famous Dungeons and Dragons campaigns is called the Tomb of Horrors.
yeah,
HORRORS.
we've had this before.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
You know what's funny is when you said it before in the episode, I went, "Did you say?" And then you elaborate horrors.
Yeah, it's best just to change the way you pronounce the word horror.
So yeah, I noticed it this time, but it really depends, and it can be a very simple campaign, especially if your dungeon master or your game master likes to keep you on track. But if he just wants you, like if he gives you all the paintbrushes and the colors and says, "Look, I'm giving you a limited number of colors, but you make the world."
You do what you
Yeah,
want.
You do
but
what you
sometimes
want.
they can get trapped into, and I'm speaking of this. I know I said I was judging you guys, and like I said, I was one of the people that Jim rolled his eyes at in high school days.
Yep.
For
many reasons.
whatever. But no, so you can have the DM and the players, and the players are like for some reason that they don't even know, they're just looking for like a secret stone in a wall that pushes in and opens a door. They don't know if there is one. They don't even know if they need to look for one.
Right.
But they're just like going, okay, I move 2 inches to the left and then I push on the wall again. Okay, I move 2 inches to the left.
Yeah.
So some DMs will just sit there and
let them
do it and say, nope, nothing happened. Nope, nothing happened. Other DMs will be like, okay, guys, there's
nothing in the wall.
There's nothing in the walls.
Yeah. Do some people try to become the dungeon master and like create their own?
Oh
site?
yeah, there's all kinds of fun politics that get involved.
And it's
sometimes.
like, dude, quit.
Guys,
do you break character and say that?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. There can be fighting
I
involved.
was just saying,
point
there
of
has to
orders.
be breaking character because there's got to be food at these things, right?
Oh yeah, we eat
like you're
that's
7 hours in a chair.
one of the most important things.
Of course, I would bring up food.
That's one of the most important things that we discuss at each time is after about because we get there around 6:30, about 7:30 or so, we're like, all right, we're getting ready to get in. Do we want to eat now or do we want to take a break in a couple hours?
Do you incorporate the eating like? We have harvested the leg of a wild boar, and it's a bean burrito.
No, but
there's
now
someone at the door.
I might want to do that.
Jot that down for your campaign.
Behold, someone stands at the door and knocks. Could
This
it
is
be
good.
the Donato's guy?
I opened.
I wanna just sit in.
Hey, can
And
I tell you
I don't
something?
wanna
As
play
someone, and it's
because of demons. But I
'cause
want to
the
just.
demons.
I just want to come in and
No,
like observe. I think it'd be so fun.
I think that would be
I'm
awesome.
inviting myself to your party.
I will invite all three of you to come. First of all, Kendall already knows like half of the people we play with.
True.
So, but yeah, I'll talk to him and see if you guys can come in and sit. Session 1 or session 0, as they call it, when
It'd be
your character
cool.
building and world building is a little rough. But I would love to have you guys.
We had kind of tongue in cheek talked about how like the three of us would set up outside of the table, and we'll
podcast
we'll bring the gear and we'll like call the game.
Yeah.
But it would be funny, like we pretend like we know exactly what's happening, and do like the ESPN Classics
So
thing I mentioned.
Jim
So
is
we-
really
So
having a hard time
what we would
deciding
need to do
between
is
Magic
set up
Missile.
some kind of like we would need like a studio with a soundproof control room is what
Yeah.
we would need so that we could
Oh,
be
that'd
in the
be
control
awesome.
room and they wouldn't hear what we're saying, so we're not distracting them, and we're like literally just watching and listening and then commenting on it.
I will say like one of the most fun things about being at the table, especially if you've got a creative group of people, they may not know what they're doing as far as the rules and the structure of the game, etc., but they make the game better. One of Kendall and I's dear friends from high school that he graduated with, he's recently joined us. He doesn't know anything about D&D. He's one of the most engaging players. He's one of the most fun players to be around because he calls everybody else out at the table for all the crazy stuff. Like, why in the world? And brings a little bit more, if you can use this term, a little bit of reality back to it.
Yeah.
And going, wait a minute, why is it every time we walk into a room, we're killing people? And it's like, well, no, we're the good guys, so it's okay. And then he's like, no, but is it? And it's in character, and we all have to step back in character and go, oh yeah, in this campaign, and we have a discussion. You get a philosophical discussion in the middle of it.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
That's the extras meme where the guys in the Nazi uniform going, "Are we the baddies?"
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's again one of the most endearing things about it is you find this group of people that enjoy and are passionate about just having a fun time.
Yeah.
And it's great. I recommend it. If not D&D, there's thousands of tabletop games out there.
Oh man.
There's some for kids. I'm actually getting ready to start looking into like getting my 8 and my 5-year-old into stuff like this because they're creative and they're fun and engaging kids.
Yeah, I've mentioned many times that I follow a ton of artists on Instagram, and,
Yeah.
and one of the most popular things I see will be some of the fastest Kickstarter campaigns are campaigns where people design and 3D print expansion packs or add-ons to D&D stories. I mean, these things, I think it's one of those things where we don't realize how many D&D geeks are out there. Like, these things are some of the fastest kickstarted things.
Yeah.
They just explode, and the artwork is beautiful, like the cards and the little players, and it's really interesting to me to kind of because we've always been in some fandoms where D&D's right on the periphery of where we are, but we've never like ventured into it. And like I said, I just think it'd be fun to just observe and be a fly on the wall.
Yeah, it is fun. I mean, I think that you have a situation where the fan base, the people who are playing Dungeons and Dragons, for the most part, are very creative people.
Yeah.
And like that's who's drawn to that kind of game. And so those are the people that are creating that artwork and coming up with these stories and expansion packs and things of that nature. So I think it lends itself to looking amazing.
Yeah.
And it is indeed a lot of fun, especially if you're a creative. It'd be a fantastic outlet. I just think it's widely misunderstood, and so I think the flip side of that is, I think at least when you're looking at the 80s and 90s, and then even still today. But today, I think it's probably less so, and maybe that's only because we're older. But the people who were sort of like the artsy, weird people playing Dungeons and Dragons were also the outcasted people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say this: it blows my mind that people didn't even that people don't even, at least back in those days, it didn't seem that they were considering that as a reason that there were some screwed up things happening.
Yeah.
Like it had everything to do with this evil game, and it had nothing to do with the way that we were treating them. So I just want people to chew on that for a minute. Like if you're still listening to this podcast, and you're probably not anymore, and you're of that opinion,
You're welcome, guys.
and you're of that opinion that people who are playing Dungeons and Dragons are about to do something dangerous to themselves or other people because they're under some kind of a demonic presence that they may or may not be willing. Like if you legitimately think that, then I'm just gonna put that out there and say, hey, there's enough of you people that outcasted those people.
And they found a community, and they found people who were creative and imaginative and fun and welcoming.
Exactly. And so if you would treat them that way, if you would treat them in a welcoming way, if you would try to actually understand what it is they're doing and talk to them about it,
Sure.
maybe they wouldn't feel as outcasted.
Yeah. Profound.
That's going to be my little soapbox situation there.
Good
Awesome.
stuff.
Anything else? So
Yeah.
so how many I kind of asked, but you didn't answer. How many spells did you have to memorize?
None.
No, none.
Thank
Zero.
goodness.
So you're not very good?
I'm not very good.
So
I still have to look at the manual to roll my characters.
Where do you get the goats that you sacrifice?
You know,
Like, where do you find
I know
them?
a lot of farmers.
Okay.
So it's kind of implied that if they're playing, they have to supply.
And do you put tarp down first? Like, because
Have you seen Dexter?
So much blood.
Have you seen Dexter? Mm-mm. Okay, I would recommend watching like season 1, where they really get into how to create a kill room.
Okay.
And this joke is really taking a dark turn.
People who don't understand
People who don't-
sarcasm are like,
well, this is not at
Wait,
all
didn't
what
that
I
other
signed
guy
up
just
for.
say?
but certainly there are other aspects to your life. You're not just a D&D
I'm not just
guy.
a D&D nerd.
This is just one thing that you're pretty fresh into.
I am a father of 2. I have 2 wonderful kids, Lucas and Johanna.
Shout out to Lucas and Johanna, who I know are listening. Sorry that your dad makes you do listen.
They may get a pass on this one. This one's pretty
But
heavy.
you guys are the cutest, and I love hanging out with you, and you're pretty awesome kids.
Thank you.
Indeed.
They appreciate you saying that.
I had a long pause there. I was looking up a Fred Rogers quote that was kind of ties back to what you were saying, Kendall.
Yeah.
So sorry to circle it back and take
No,
so
not at all.
long, but I really like Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers,
Yeah.
AK, and he was very, very, very conscious about what the world was showing to children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I do realize that this could be, this could seem like the opposite of what I'm trying to say, because he was very conscious about showing kids things that were violent or dark or whatever.
Right.
But the quote is, knowing that we can be loved exactly as we are gives us all the opportunity for growing into the healthiest of people. And so I think that speaks to this whole idea of pushing people to become outcasts. Getting into their space and learning who they are as people and learning what makes them tick is the exact antidote for what you're afraid could happen. If you just learn who they are and learn about what they care about, I think that's probably the best thing we can do for anybody that lives in a space that we don't understand.
Yep.
Wow.
I love it.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
great.
how we find
That
a
was
way
cool.
to like. I don't know. We're awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I don't know
No
how we don't have.
self-defecation here.
James Taylor comes on the show,
Yes,
and we
yeah.
just start showering the people we love with love.
This will be
this
when we
onion's
hit
got
critical
layers.
mass. I can, the S curve. Like it's gonna
Yeah.
just this episode right here. What you just said. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Thank you, James Taylor, Elizabeth Taylor, for making it all possible. I just. This is. I mean, seriously. I don't think people grasp how awesome we are.
He's got a tear in his
minute.
eye while he's saying that.
You know, they just need to know.
Bang, 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 bang.
That was in my head like when Kendall started and he ended that the more you know you just did, because I know that's what you did.
And it's a Crystalia thing.
Of course it is.
But,
There he is.
There it is.
Well, thanks,
Have we-
man,
Yeah.
for coming in onto the show and talking about a world that we know very little about, that we were ignorant to, and seriously, we want to come and like sit
Yeah.
in, and even if we don't report live, we should do like a follow-up episode,
Sure.
where we talk about the fact that we've just observed this thing.
Yeah. That'd be fun.
I'll bring a bunch of Lego knights for your characters.
that would be awesome.
And
I would
things.
love that.
Lego
That
actually would be
great.
an awesome.
It would.
It's not an inexpensive resource, but if you already have that in your house, would be an awesome resource for using for world building
Yeah.
characters and things. Because if you've already got knights and pirates and orcs and all those little minifigs,
Yep.
Yeah.
you've got what you need for some fun. So
There you go.
Find out what makes you happy. Go out, have fun doing it.
Yeah.
That's
There you go.
it's great.
That's
Kendall,
it.
did we cut off any of your questions? Sorry, man.
No. I mean, through all of that, that was my questions were kind of directed ones, and that like
They were
I
a little
wanted-
pointed.
They
Yeah.
were well. So I had like the goofy one or two at
Sure.
the beginning, right? With my Jiminy Glick voice that I tried.
What'd you say is going on here?
Slash Cat in the Hat. Yeah.
He knows a lot about that.
I don't think those two names have ever been divided by a slash before.
Yes.
Jiminy Glick and Cat in the Hat
And Martin Short
were
plays
never
both.
lumped together.
Yeah, they have
before.
this. They have the same voice.
Wasn't it Mike Myers that played Cat in the Hat?
No,
Today,
in the live
today.
action movie, in the
Right
cartoon.
now, there's a current. Your kid is too little.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You'll find out.
She only watches music videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like
Little
Disney,
Cardi B.
Disney.
Lizzo.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
okay.
okay. I was gonna say, well, that's good. That's a
Music, no. Like there's an ultimate Disney playlist. It's like 300 songs
Ugh.
from the movies
Yeah.
just in a row.
well. That says
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, I was gonna say, well, that's about as appropriate as Jim teaching his kids to play Dungeons and Dragons, which is not what he said. But I know that there are people who think that's what he said.
Yeah, no,
I'm sure.
This
But
is
anyway.
like Sing and Pocahontas, so I think we're good.
All right.
We are from the middle.
The end is near. Sorry, he said sing, so I thought a
And
mic
we
from sing.
just, we may have just changed the world.
I think we did.
One nerd
Follow
at
us.
a time.
Listen to us, post things, give us voicemails on stuff. You know all of the drills from the mid pod. Everywhere is where you can find us on social media. You can email us from the middle at protonmail.com. You can click the link in the description to leave us a voicemail. We'll throw your voice onto an episode. We'll answer your questions, or we'll play your comment and we'll play off your comments, whatever it is. Just let us know. We love you guys. We appreciate it. Jim, thank you.
Thank you
My
so
pleasure.
much, man. That was
Thanks for
fun.
having me.
And just for good measure, because I don't think it was mentioned yet, Sebastian Miniskip.